getting ready for the incredible sound of classic rock? No? Good, because now it's time for Visiting the Village.
Welcome to Visiting the Village. I'm Paul Kilduff-Taylor, and joining me as ever is the insouciant Ian Hardingham.
Hello, Mr. Paul Kilduff-Taylor. I was interviewed on BBC Radio this week. I was being asked questions by a man who wasn't you. It felt very strange and disturbing, and I don't want to do it again.
Let's get out of this dungeon.
It's the top story.
PC piracy will be dead within 2 years, claims a founder of cracking forum 3DM. Apparently anti-tampering software Denuvo is too complicated and difficult to deal with. Denuvo isn't DRM in and of itself, but it prevents other DRM measures from being altered or removed. Ian Hardingham, is piracy really going to die?
I would guess not. This is a pretty surprising thing for anyone to say, let alone a cracking group, who usually have enough ego to fill a small ocean. And I also kind of just don't buy it. We're in an arms race. We always have been. Piracy and anti-piracy protection. And while I'm afraid I don't really understand this technology enough to really know whether it's some kind of fundamentally better system, apparently it kind of randomly jiggles up the contents of the binary files in a game to make it much harder to apply patches to it. I'm still kind of... I'm siding on no, this is not going to be something that the cracking groups fail to get past, but it is always possible. Maybe this is the key.
It's a really interesting thing for them to say, you're right. I mean, this is a Chinese forum, and we all know about things translated from particularly Asian languages into English tend to be not quite given the right inflection unless the translation is really, really good. It seems like an odd thing. I think they've probably just done this to draw attention to the fact that they're working really hard on it because they keep having lots of demand from their users for games that are shrouded in Denuvo. So I think this is actually a bit of PR from the cracking group, just saying, "Look, guys,
oh my goodness, PR!
Look, guys, we're trying."
Yeah, I was kind of intrigued to hear that it had been really successful on Just Cause 3 and FIFA 16.
Yeah.
These are still encrypted. These haven't had a wide crack. And Dragon Age Inquisition, which was the first major game to use this software, took a month to be pirated. Now, as we know, as people who make and release games, it's the first month that's the most important, not to be cracked.
Yeah.
So that's just a massive win. And I'm kind of surprised this is the first I'm hearing about it. I'm surprised that the makers of Just Cause 3, FIFA 16 haven't waved the flag about this more concertedly, but maybe they don't want to anger the cracking groups, they don't want to become the new target. But I've always kind of felt that people worry about piracy much too much. I'm always happy when someone who can't afford to buy my games is playing my games. That's kind of something that I don't necessarily have a problem with if they genuinely can't afford it. But I think it's also fair to say that we as developers like having the choice of how to distribute the things that we make.
Yeah.
So I'm still in favour of things which can stop piracy, even though I still really think it's a muddy area.
Yeah, the thing I've always said is that as long as it's not punitive in any way to users, then I think that there are things you can explore. So as long as it doesn't affect users, and it really doesn't seem like this Denuvo thing does affect users very much. As you say, we haven't heard about it. If it was like the DRM disasters of yore, then we would have done, even though technically
Sony rootkit, raise your disgusting hand.
Yeah, Star Force and all that. So it's actually interesting. Maybe we're at a point now where the countermeasures are actually getting a lot more intelligent. There are people really applying themselves to this stuff who actually know what users need and are working around that, perhaps. So that could be an interesting stage in the anti-piratical warfare.
Yeah, I mean, the key concept of this to basically make every single different person's copy of a game so different that no one crack is going to apply to more than one person's copy. It's very clever.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend the next couple of weeks sort of thinking about it in the background, trying to work out whether I think it's fundamental or whether it's something which can be overcome. I remember my mother complaining when her bank sent her one of those little dongles that you get special codes out of to log into the website. But the honest truth is that those things are incredibly they're a massive step forward in security. And this could be similar. So I'm gonna try in some spare moments thinking about it. But good job, De Nouveau.
Valve accidentally published a report on the success of their last sale period to members of the public Steam VR group. According to the report, changes made for the last few sales, for example removing flash sales and daily deals, have led to a higher number of sales overall. Also encouraging users to try the discovery queue feature has meant that games outside of the top 500 have seen their revenue increase by about 45%. Does this mean that the discovery queue is an effective and fair way to deal with Steam's rapidly expanding catalogue?
Well, it doesn't mean that. I think that the discovery queue is a good thing. I think it's only going to improve. I mean, it is fundamentally a thing which shows you games you might not have heard of that you might like, which sounds like a tool, that we can get on board with. When I first heard that Steam were changing the way that they do sales to have discounts be consistent throughout the sale rather than daily discounts being the predominant part of the sale, I was unclear whether that was going to work or not. I think it's fairer for the consumers, but I know how massive a deal 6 p.m. GMT on a Steam sale day was.
Yeah.
Everyone logged in straight away. At that time, it was a massive call to action to find out what the new discounted thing was. And I thought it was more likely than not, though not overwhelmingly likely, that they would actually see fewer visits because of this approach. And this appears to not be the case. So obviously, as people who sell things on Steam, we're really happy about that.
Yes.
I'm really excited about it. Digging deeper into the sales figures of games outside of the Steam top 500. On average, these games had 4 times as many views and 45% greater sales. So, they're getting the conversion rate implied by that means that a lot more people are looking at it through the discovery queues. Those people will convert less well. That's what the number says, and that's totally fine. That makes sense. If I know of an obscure game and I want to go and buy it, then that's going to convert better than if I've never heard of it before and it's showing up on my discovery queue. But that's totally cool. We all want a situation where really good, interesting, unique, unusual games on Steam sell well.
Yeah.
I think the discovery queue is evolving. I don't think it was there right at the beginning. I don't think it's quite there still, but I think this is a good sign.
Yeah, I think this is very good if you're someone who puts games on Steam that are not likely to be these kind of mega trendy hits. I think that possibly some people might have made more money under the older system. Some notable indie games might have made more money just because of the as you say, like the really powerful call to action of those daily deals. I think there could be a perfect storm of your game coming out at the right time and then being in a daily deal. We certainly had some of that. But this feels like...
Yeah, and also, sorry, just to stop you there just for a second, it's not just that. You were tended to be featured for much longer.
Yeah.
As a medium level game under the old system, you'd be featured for the whole day, and Steam have been sort of really screwing around with how they feature, and those kind of games will be featured for less long as well, so that's definitely a factor.
Yes, absolutely. So those things combined really meant that was a sort of very specific boost for your game that I don't think will ever be replicated under this system if you're not, one of those things that gets featured all the time. However, this feels like it's more robust for Steam as an ecosystem overall. It feels less gimmicky. It feels like something that's going to build more long-term customer trust. As a customer, I quite like the idea of I don't have to rush online at the specific time, or maybe it's going to get featured in a few days and I've bought it at the wrong price and so on. That feels a lot better to me. It feels like I'm making a fairer deal with Steam about what I buy, and then I might be maybe therefore more likely to check out things that Steam recommends to me, providing that the recommendation algorithm is really good. So I like this. I think it might be perhaps potentially worse for games like ours and developers like ours, but even despite that, I'm still happy for it to, be a healthy ecosystem. So I think I like this.
I think it'll help the long tail of our games.
Yeah, sure.
Even if it might possibly hurt them at the beginning, I guess. And that's always nice. I wish the discovery queue, and to be fair, I haven't looked at it for a couple of months, so maybe it's changed dramatically. I don't think it's presented as well as possible as like this awesome list of things that might really excite you.
Yeah.
I think just the presentation could be improved. I'd quite like to look at several titles at once. I didn't actually like the linear way they were doing it, even though that linear way does make a lot of sense. I can understand why someone would design the system around that.
Yeah.
It just wasn't quite as a sort of attractive a storefront as I might have wanted. But there's not much else to say about this. This is really positive. It's obviously better for consumers to be able to buy a game at any day during the sale and not be worried that it'll be £10 less expensive the next day. That was kind of a silly situation.
Yeah.
I don't know if this will cause the Steam sales to be too long. I guess not. So there's not really anything else to say about it. It's really nice. I'm glad. I wasn't completely sure it was going to turn out well, but it has.
Sure. One other thing about recommendation stuff before we leave this. Something that I really personally like, and I have no idea how common this is knowing why something is popular when it's recommended to me. So Netflix has that trending thing, the trending on Facebook, I think it has. I actually really like that. Like, sometimes I want to see and maybe watch, things that are generally popular in a service like Netflix that has a lot of discoverability problems. So something I'd really like in the recommendation queue is to know why things are popular. Like, why does it think beyond you like X and Y that I would like this? Who are the kind of people that like it? Did it get good reviews from sites that I like? Is it being talked about in a forum I like?
But the reason why they can't do that, because I agree that would be awesome, is because the system's too it's too abstract for that. It literally sort of has like a neural net of other people who liked these games also liked these games, and it's just generally as straightforward as that, which isn't something that it kind of explain. It sort of sometimes these systems get so kind of fundamental, and a lot of spam detection algorithms are like this. They don't know why they think something's spam. They just know that they think it's spam because it's just based on this massive amount of data. But I totally agree with you. I don't know if you saw this thing that you can hack into Netflix and get access to their really obscure lists.
Really? Awesome.
You can get 70s B movies that are starring someone who was aged 30 and under, that kind of thing.
I want that. Why can't I have that? Why don't the users have that? That's ridiculous.
You can hack into it and get it. It's pretty easy, and that's what they use to give you the much more specific recommendations after you've finished watching a title.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's awesome. Wow.
So people really like that.
Yes,
and of course, there are enough meaningful genres that Netflix has identified. So there is that kind of thing that exists.
Yeah. I guess, yes, so sure, maybe not necessarily knowing, in inverted commas, why it's popular, but perhaps finding some way of presenting that sort of metadata around a game a bit better in the queue. Maybe just something as simple as automatically attaching review quotes to it or something might be quite nice. But anyway, there you go. BitTech published a list of silly gaming trends for 2016, including such gems as Psychonauts 2 taking place in your own imagination and games becoming impossibly difficult, leading to increased diagnosis of PTSD. Do you have any trends, serious or stupid, that you've spotted for 2016?
So which one of those is VR? Is VR serious or stupid?
I think both.
I joke. Yes, always nice to read a humorous take on the upcoming year. Psychonauts. I kind of want to just say stop on Psychonauts to everyone. Psychonauts 1 was good, but I just kind of have such a lack of confidence that Double Fine are going to hit Psychonauts 2 out of the park, but maybe they will.
Yeah.
When it comes to my trends of this year, VR will continue to bubble under the surface, and I think we're going to start getting a really good idea about what Nintendo's new console is, and I think that may sort of define a period of the year, like starting to work out whether people are excited about that or not. Apart from that, we did talk about some kind of it's another year in the maturity of the consoles. You always see these changes over time. We're going to get some bigger experiences, I think. I think we're going to start getting some really good and less normal console games now.
Yeah.
I think this is the time for some kind of AA bordering on AAA sort of new IP We've seen a bit of that in the past. Nothing particularly interesting there, but that's what I'm seeing in my crystal ball.
I think you're right. I mean, based on some of the upcoming titles that Sony announced last year at the various conferences, we're going to see a lot of things that involve running around big environments with lots of weird creatures and monsters. Like Wild, I think it's called. There's one where you shoot dinosaurs that's just like a Turok thing. There's all that stuff. That's going to happen. Procedurally generated big worlds where you run around in third person doing boring shooting. That's going to happen. I think we're probably going to see, my call is we're going to see another thing that's like Rocket League. So a mid-budget multiplayer thing that catches on for a very brief period of time and kind of has this massive surge in popularity. I think so many people are going to be trying to do that now that we might well see one of those things have a similar impact this year.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I also think something that we've talked about, I think we're going to see some genres sort of coalesce into being big genres even further. And I think we might start to see more obvious genre classifications with more big indie games.
Right.
That's kind of what I feel is going to happen. People kind of are starting to understand what a roguelite is. They're starting to understand what a survival game is, what a crafting game is. And I think what you're going to see is a lot of people entering the market with games that are iterations and polishings of things that already exist.
Right.
And a little bit of a downturn in the kind of rank sort of new ground that's been covered so much in the last few years. I think that we are in a cycle in those terms.
Yeah.
And I think you always have massive pushes of incredibly new thinking in a form, and then you have a stage where you have like a consolidation around that, and that's what I think's starting this year for me.
Genre stratification. Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, there are some good trends. ESPN now have an eSports portal in their website. We just can't get enough of eSports. The network is now publishing news, highlights, and commentary for a variety of games such as LoL, Dota, and Hearthstone. Ian Hardingham, can ESPN make the ESPN of eSports?
ESPN can. The question, I think, is ESPN going to stick with this long enough? This site's really good as a kind of pretense that they're taking eSports seriously. It looks like their sort of channel site for any other sport. They've hired a couple of writers. They've got quite a lot of content on here for the first drop. Although every single one of the articles has to start off pretending it's talking to someone who's never heard of esports before.
Yeah.
I don't particularly think this is a massively important step for esports.
No.
I think this is ESPN covering their bases. And I think this thing will probably be termed a failure by ESPN, but the next thing they do might not be. That's my call for this.
Yeah, I agree. This isn't anything special in and of itself. It looks like a very bland mainstream gaming site. Hey, let's do something about esports page. It's all just results. It's like there's nothing here that I would want to look at as somebody who tangentially knows about, a few of these games. Like, I don't care about, like, a new Dota tournament being announced. I don't care about the off-season for LCS. Like, if I care about those things, I'm not going to get my news from here either. So I feel like this is pretty bad as those things go. In terms of whether the next thing they do will be interesting, yeah, I don't know. This doesn't bode well.
Yeah, they've got to actually start putting games on. That's when ESPN will start caring about stuff. I was really... So I had to buy Sky Sports this month because to watch the NFL playoffs. I don't need Sky Sports to watch the NFL regular season because I have the direct Game Pass thing from the NFL, so I can just watch it online, which is much cheaper. And the sports channels that I have are BT Sport. And watching BT Sport and then watching Sky Sports, I was reminded by the extent to which these things push the events they have on their channels. Now, that makes obvious sense, but it's actually kind of disturbing to see that you would kind of think that ESPN's front page would be about what people want to see most, and it's not. It's like a combination of that and what they want you to see the most.
Yeah.
They are advertising their content by their front page. The front page of their website is not the most important part of their business. Their most important part of their business is their TV channels, be those streaming online or traditionally on your TV. And I think that's the key. You know, as long as they're just putting a website on it, that doesn't mean they care about it very much.
Yeah.
When they start investing real boots on the ground, putting these shows on their air, on ESPN2 or ESPNU, they've got 50 channels they can put something on. Then they'll care about it. The thing you don't want to happen is to have a bad, sort of a lackluster reception to this completely lackluster site, and that to persuade ESPN that there's nothing here. That's the danger here.
Yeah, this is the wrong toe in the wrong water, and I'm still really unsure about the crossover between different esports. Like, we need some stats on this. Someone will know this within the industry. How many people get into other esports from one esport, and how many people watch all of these different things? Because I just don't think, you know, maybe people watch LoL and Dota, but I don't think people watch StarCraft and Dota or StarCraft and Hearthstone that much. I think a lot of people are mono esports. Yeah,
I mean, it would be a really bold play for them to just launch this big thing, but only for LoL.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be really quite interesting.
It would.
The only thing that reminds me of, to put everything under this umbrella of esports, is X Games.
Yeah.
Which is like my least favourite kind of games. I don't like how that's all put together in one thing, personally. But that's kind of what this is like. And yeah, it is a bit unsatisfying. I just don't know. You know, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world if this got like a load of 11 and 12-year-olds who are massive sports fans and also massive gamers and really hadn't heard of pro gaming before, and they start checking out the eSports tab on ESPN. Like,
no,
that could work.
No, that's about half the age of their youngest demographic, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if that's true, fair enough. I'm just thinking it's got to be someone young enough to not already be in the scene, because the people who are already interested in the scene are not going to be impressed with ESPN's coverage of it. You know, as you're saying,
it's amazing that you've gone young for this. Like, this is for like 30-year-olds who haven't heard of it.
So this is kind of, just like a new direction that I'm thinking of. Yeah, obviously it would be great if they could convert 30-year-old basketball fans. But I'm just thinking also about, there are a lot of young people who are obsessed with sports and obsessed with, like, checking ESPN. And they, like, for them, this might feel like a sort of a pro sports branded version of gaming. I'm just kind of trying to concoct a scenario where this might be surprisingly successful. I could definitely see a kid be like, wow, I want to watch these cool guys that I aspire to be playing video games and stuff.
They're not going to get there through ESPN. Surely if you're young and you're into this stuff, like, you're not going through like the old hoary traditional media. You're going for it.
You mean if you're into like professional normal sports?
Well, if you have any interest in gaming, like, and you happen to be into normal sports.
Well, I think like most 11-year-olds, like, say in the US, are into gaming, right?
Yeah.
But they may just not be into pro gaming in any way. But they could definitely be massive, like, Cleveland Cavaliers fans, and be like checking ESPN for more data on that, and then see this cool gaming thing. I could totally see that as the entrance. I mean, like, they're gonna have to be exposed to pro gaming for the first time somehow. Like,
I think that's going to be through the game they like.
This is for people who aren't playing these games yet. Like, this is what I'm talking about, for people who are not playing LoL. Like, at some point there is an age where you haven't played LoL yet, or haven't even sort of necessarily started playing online PC games yet. Maybe you're just a PS4 player, you've got a PS4 and you're 10 or something. And yeah, you're a massive sports fan, and this is kind of like your first view into something that seems to combine two things. You seem ultra
I'm amazed, but this is the most amazing thing you've ever argued to me, that there's like 10-year-olds out there who are on ESPN looking at Cleveland Cavaliers results, and they're like, hey, what are esports? And they're looking at like the guide to League of Legends. That seems like the tiniest group of people I could possibly imagine.
So you don't think there are people that age looking at ESPN.com?
No, I don't think there are people looking at that age at ESPN.com who wouldn't be able to have heard about esports from somewhere that isn't ESPN.com.
Okay. I mean, okay, fair enough.
I mean, just based on like the media trends of like young kids, it just doesn't seem like this is going to be the way that they get into it.
So, so you reckon that all kids have like also a go-to games website? That's what you're saying?
No, yes, presumably yes, but it just seems like a very odd trajectory that you would come at this from if you're that age, because the media that kids who are that age like is not this.
I think you're confusing two things here. Like, I think that you're right that the people who are that age aren't watching a lot of TV shows in the way that we did on television. I'm pretty sure they're still using ESPN.com to get their sports news. So I don't think it's like that weird that they would be looking at this website at the time in life where they were kind of transitioning into being sort of receptive to seeing like a larger sphere of gaming influence beyond just playing with their mates on their Wii or something.
I mean, so I'm trying to frantically find things that back up what I'm saying. ESPN's median age is 29. 66% of its audience is between 18 and 34. 87% of its audience is college educated.
Okay.
I mean, I just don't think there's 10-year-olds on here, man. Like, I just don't think they're there. Like that.
Fair enough. Well, then it's complete waste of time.
YouTube luminary PewDiePie has partnered with Disney subsidiary Maker Studios to create a new media network called Revel Mode. Apparently he and a bunch of other YouTube stars will collaborate on new videos, games, and other projects. PewDiePie's not going anywhere, is he?
I don't think he is. So this is where we go next with these new YouTube stars. I was interested, so this is a video network. Is this just like another thing that you get on the internet? Or like, is Disney going to put this onto a channel? I know I'm obsessed with TV channels still, but this is kind of interesting to me. Is he going to like go sort of transition into also being on traditional media, do you think? Or is this just going to be something you get through the internet?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the networks are kind of known things with YouTube, so it doesn't seem to be particularly a new thing. I mean, I guess this is just a bit of a land grab, more of a land grab from Disney, who kind of entered the YouTube thing by acquiring like some of the more successful networks, I believe. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting to me to see this consolidation of stuff. Like, I mean, they've got just out of this list, Jacksepticeye, Markiplier, and PewDiePie in the same place is like a massive part of the internet. And then there's Dodger, who kind of crosses over a bit with the sort of Total Biscuit, Jesse Cox kind of demographic. So they're really gone for like a very core group of gaming related and sort of teen related YouTubers here. Does it mean they'll be on TV? I guess if there's something that they produce that would be likely to be on TV, then that's possible. He's already doing this thing for YouTube Red, which is just basically a TV show. And it's a very different format from the YouTube stuff. I mean, this is interesting. This is probably where those 10-year-olds are, to be honest.
They're watching PewDiePie on Disney. Yeah. For me, this like is another example of Disney just trying to take over the world. They've kind of gone into full-on acquisition mode in the last decade.
Yeah.
They're just like acquiring everything they possibly can. And, you know, no one's bigger than PewDiePie in this space.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see where this goes as well. I remember when Disney signed The Rock to a 10-year exclusive film deal.
That actually probably worked quite well.
This caused The Rock to be in sort of basically slightly boring children's films for 10 years. Which was a negative for me, I have to say. Yeah, I don't know if there'll be any exclusivity. I mean, I doubt he's signed up for that. Although, you know, again, they've got enough money to do whatever they want. I mean, you know, in 10, 15 years, we'll think it's pretty quaint, you know, that everyone made such a big fuss about this new way for people to become famous.
Yeah.
It'll be nice to know in 5, 10 years what the actual path is for these celebrities. Like, do they eventually end up doing like a morning news show? You know, do they like when they're 40?
Yeah.
Are they, you know, what Kathy Lee and Hoter are now, but on the internet? I don't know. It'd be really interesting to see if he's big in 20 years. Like, I'm sure he'll have a couple of film cameos.
Yes.
You know, maybe he'll make a skateboard. You know, we're past the point of understanding that this is happening. It would be quite cool to see like what the long-term implications for these guys.
What the future is. Yeah, that just reminded me of obviously the massive amount of David Bowie related content, or Bowie, on the internet recently. And he said in an interview he expected to die at 30, and then he didn't. And he was like, okay, I have to figure out what to do now. And he said that the best thing about being old and a rock star was like all the young popular bands had to kind of look at him to see what you do when you're old. So he felt like he was still pioneering something. And that's going to be true of these people. Like, they're probably not going to be shouting into a webcam in their 40s, although I would quite like to see that, to be honest. It's one thing that really interests me with this is the kind of the spectrum of these people. So a lot of these really popular YouTubers, they kind of cluster around the same thing, which is talking very quickly in kind of a high-pitched, funny voice about a kind of a sort of weird game that they're playing. And that's definitely kind of the genre of this. And then you've got the kind of teen, makeup and fashion stuff that's aimed more at girls. So it's very, very conservative. Like, even Jacksepticeye, Markiplier, and PewDiePie, you can see there's a lot of commonality between them. But there's a kind of trajectory where PewDiePie would sort of be at the more kind of extreme, hyper silly end, and then Markiplier would be a little bit more of a sort of, like, I think more adults watch Markiplier, even though he's sort of older teenagers, and he's just slightly less shrill and slightly less silly. But it's that there's that continuum within this tiny demographic of things that work perfectly well. The thing I feel with YouTube is that it just needs to evolve now. There's got to be new types of thing that can come out that are a bit like this, because this is so narrow.
Yeah, totally agree with all of that. I don't know what else there is to say. I mean, it feels like we're in a big transitionary stage, and I want to get there already.
Duke Nukem voice actor John has said that he had to turn down a big role doing the voiceover for a Republican Party presidential primary frontrunner, not named, as his conscience would not allow him to do it. Has your conscience ever got in the way of a good payday?
Obviously not, because I work with you. I don't think so, although we did once turn down doing porting for a porn game, if I recall correctly.
That's right.
But that was mainly my wife's conscience that I was worried about, not mine. No, apart from that, I mean, we're fairly conscientious people. I don't think I've had to make any particularly difficult calls in my life.
Right. I mean, this one is interesting. Like, I was trying to think, would I do this? He is such a distinctive voice, which is where they want him, that being associated with a political candidate that you don't fully... maybe he votes Republican. Like, I don't know anything about this guy. Maybe he quite liked them, but that if you don't fully believe in that candidate, you will be associated with them forever, and you'll never be able to work for the other side. You'll never be able to do this or that, whatever. So I think you're probably right to turn this down. And also, he's the bigger man by not naming who it was. But the idea of Trump coming out to, like, Duke Nukem shouting stuff about terrorists would be amazing. I mean, the internet would love that.
If I can guess, I will guess that he is a Republican, because a lot of Republicans are not at all happy with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that if there was a Trump-like figure in the UK running for Prime Minister, that I would not make a game supporting his candidacy.
Sure.
I definitely think that's totally cool. I think it's kind of amazing that the Duke Nukem voice actor's still alive, let alone still voice acting. Being
associated with stuff is weird. I think the only comparable thing I had was my music being used on a news report in Israel, without sort of prior consent, which is fine. And I have now been paid for that. And that was really weird because a lot of people started sending it to me, and it was this quite serious news item. And if that had been in something where I didn't agree with what it was saying, I think that would be a bit weird. I've also had music used in a comedy video, and I honestly didn't understand what political point that video was making, so again, that was okay. But if it showed up on something I really, really disliked without my consent, I would feel pretty bad about that. I would probably try and look into taking some action to get it taken off, at least. Because what you're associated with politically is a big deal, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably with music, people don't... people know that where music is used is so wide ranging, and with the laws of music and where everyone's signed up to this service that basically allows anyone to use it as long as they pay their subscription or whatever.
Yeah.
I think people don't go super worried about that. They don't automatically assume that you're supporting whatever the news item would be about, for instance.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting policy. I can't really think of something particularly similar with games. I mean, maybe if our game was used in the background for a TV advert or something.
Yeah.
In general, I don't go too far about this, but I think with the Donald Trump thing, I think it's fine to just be really anti it. Just like it's fine to be really anti-UKIP if you want to be. We're allowed to have political beliefs, and as long as you're not restricting freedom of speech, you can restrict your involvement in something, and that's okay with me.
Lego are changing their policy on bulk purchases of their products after coming under fire for refusing to sell Chinese artist Ai Weiwei a load of Lego blocks for one of his installations. Apparently, the company will no longer ask customers if the bricks are to be used to make political statements before agreeing to sell. A good question from producer Jimmy: was this a missed opportunity for Mega Bloks?
Yeah, I don't know how long Lego have had this ludicrous policy, but that should have been the forefront of Mega Bloks advertising. I'm really annoyed that we didn't find out about this Lego policy before they changed it, because I would have got so angry about it. It's so unacceptable that you have to tell them what you're going to do with the Lego before they'll sell you the Lego.
This was a huge thing because he had to kind of make replica Lego to do his art installation.
I'm very glad they've changed it. I think it's complete nonsense. I think Lego should just sell bricks to whoever. They're just lucky that someone wants to buy a lot of their bricks. Idiots.
But you've just said in the last item that you think it's important to be able to determine where your thing is used politically.
I believe I also said as long as it doesn't block freedom of speech. This is a great pair of things to put together. Certainly, if you were restricting the use of your synthesizer to make the music for the advert, right, then that would be a more interesting discussion. Sure. And certainly, I don't think Lego. That falls on the other side of the line for me.
It's an interesting one, though, because I can understand, if you're making this thing, it's basically a toy and you want it to be politically neutral. It's so funny that it comes at the point where you're buying the thing in bulk. They ask you this question, as opposed to, just going around, having a usage agreement where they say, I guess it could be part of that, but it's just, I feel like you that it's inherently ludicrous. But also I understand it just, based on what we've just been talking about. Yes, it is a tool, but also I think Lego itself is kind of conceived more as a toy, and people have taken it to use it for other things. So I don't think they consider it a medium. Well,
yeah, I don't know what to say. It just feels very wrong to me that they would, block you from making any political statement with it. We should be allowed to make political statements with anything that we like. I think there is a difference of specificity here.
What about if someone used a Barbie to make a political statement?
Well, I was going to say, I actually think that toys have been used a lot to make political statements, and I'm sure that people have used Barbies too in the past. Barbies represent something. Probably one of the reasons you chose it an example. They represent something quite specific that can be used for political statements, political satire. I think that if you sell a thing, then people should be allowed to use it in a political statement. I honestly do. Now, whether that counts as right for your music track, they didn't buy it from you. But specifically, you have to have a different kind of agreement with a music producer to use their music on something like an advert than you do to just listen to it, right?
Yes.
I think if you buy a physical product, maybe there's some kind of physical product differentiation here. I've got into a real political dogfight
interesting.
Here. But yeah, no, I kind of think that if it's an object and you've bought it and you want to, make it look a bit like a dildo and use it to make a political statement about something, I think that you should be allowed to. And I just really bristle at the assumption that kind of Lego would be the people who get to choose if Lego can be used for a political statement. I don't know. I'm going to have to examine my own feelings about whether that's to do with the fact that I think Lego is basically public domain at this point, or again, whether you should just be able to buy 1,000 Barbies.
Oh, well, it's certainly not public domain. They're a fantastically litigious kind of controlling company.
No, I don't mean like that. I kind of mean, I probably used the wrong term there. I sort of mean like, as a concept, Lego is sort of entered the public domain, not as sort of something that you can copy or...
Okay.
whether you can reproduce it, but sort of as an idea, just like in some ways I would say, Barbie has. It's kind of sort of culturally public domain in that, it's something that people use as a touchstone to mean various different things, I guess.
I think the crux of it here is, I think my Barbie argument is largely facetious because it's not a tool that you can use to represent anything. So Lego you could say is like paint or ink. And I think that's kind of okay. Like, I think that the most cogent part of this argument where it can be used for any purpose is that it really is a medium. And Lego needs to wake up to that.
And to be clear, I don't necessarily think it shouldn't be Lego's right to have a EULA that says you can't do that. I just would disagree with them specifying that right. I'm not sure I think it shouldn't be legal. That's like a different conversation for me. It's just something that I would be very annoyed about them doing, just because I think that it's kind of... You're Lego. You make things that, and it's probably good for your business, whatever happens.
Right.
And if someone wants to make a giant thing with your bricks, you should sell it to them and not be prissy about it.
Sure. And also, I think I've always argued for sort of slightly wider ranging and more robust fair use for anything kind of copyright-wise. And if you're using, if you're using Barbie to satirize Mattel or to satirize the idea of Barbie, then that should be okay. You should be allowed to, as you say, take something that you own or that you've bought and use it to make statements that, irrespective of the copyright, of the originator. That's very important, and I think that should be a bit more robust in legal terms. Yeah, it does. Saying that you can't buy it in bulk to make political statements is very silly, because does that mean if you buy a Lego car and you make a swastika out of it, that's okay? But if you buy 100 Lego cars and make 100 swastikas, that's not okay. That seems very silly. And also, I think they could have couched this in something more along the lines of, a large-scale public installation involving our product would be something that we'd like to give approval for. I think that might be a little bit of a better way of going about it, because then what you could do is you could filter out something that's incredibly offensive to your brand, perhaps. That way, I know that contradicts what I've just said, but I'm just trying to think about other ways they could do this other than this sort of blanket silly thing.
Sure, I think one of the other reasons why this kind of rubs me up the wrong way, and I don't want to be like tremendously politically offensive here, so I'll choose my words carefully. I think it would be fair to say that we'd like it to be easier for artists and journalists in China to make political statements if they so desire. And there's something so kind of bemusing about it being the Danish company Lego, which is the thing causing the problem for this particular Chinese artist who lives in a state where it's often extremely dangerous to yourself to make political statements. I think there's something really bemusing about that, which makes this whole thing more inflammatory.
Right, absolutely, yes. And this particular artist is one of the reasons why this has become news, and it was a very poorly chosen sort of target for this, I agree. Yeah, it's interesting though. I mean, again, like if someone did this in Minecraft, what would Mojang do about it, or Microsoft do about it? We really are in this time where I think individual expression with whatever medium possible is something that we need to enshrine properly. So maybe they need to drop this.
Absolutely.
Right, that's enough of that, and now we move back in time. Finally, the wheels of releases back in the early 2000s have kicked in after Christmas, and we have some games to talk about. So let's jump straight into this. On the 12th of January this week in 2006, thanks to Eurogamer, we had Far Cry Vengeance for the Wii. Now, producer Jimmy points out this seems unlikely as the Wii wasn't released until the end of 2006, but let's talk about Far Cry Vengeance on the Wii anyway.
Now, I actually think this is rather a dark day for the Visiting the Village segment released this week 10 years ago.
Yes.
I think this has cast a real layer of concern over the accuracy of Eurogamer's release date system. I have been concerned about some aspects of it in the past, and this, as Jimmer points out, is definitely a problem. Although I'm not actually... No, he's right, it was released then, sorry. So we're just going to keep on going regardless, as you say, and just hope that Eurogamer is right.
It's just some games.
Far Cry Vengeance is really fun. I played this game, multiplayer. It was like one of the first like big budget attempts at making a first-person shooter using the Wiimote. It was really amazingly fun multiplayer game. It was really janky. It was fun to play. This was like one of the cool sides of the Wii, when they took traditional gaming experiences and completely screwed them up by making the Wiimote involved. I love that, and this is a great game.
People thought that the Wiimote was going to be good for FPSs. They really thought that. And it wasn't.
Yeah, they did. The problem is your arm gets tired.
Yep.
Beyond any of the other issues with it, it's a very tiring mechanism. And even with this, you'd still be playing it like held in a traditional way. Just be trying to like point it at the screen in sort of a weird manner.
From your hip.
But the levels were cool. The engine was like really, really, really lo-fi and silly. But it was, like I say, just a really, really incredibly fun split screen deathmatch game.
Well, that's that. And the only other thing on the 13th of January was The Sims 2 on the PSP. Now, thinking about this, I might conceivably play a Sims game on the Vita. Like, if it wasn't just an awful kind of cut-down portable one. Like, if it was some really fully featured thing where you could kind of check in and vaguely do stuff, I think I'd do that. There aren't enough games where you just check in and do stuff that aren't terrible free-to-play games.
I play almost anything on the Vita. I definitely give The Sims 2 a go. But I haven't played this. I haven't played a Sims game since The Sims 1 came out for the PC. And it was actually kind of a mildly cool thing to be playing when it first came out, because it didn't have quite as much stigma about being this sort of slightly weird casual game. And it felt a bit like a, in some ways, groundbreaking PC game.
Yeah. No, I think that there have definitely been some good nostalgic retrospective articles about the early Sims games, certainly in comparison to the later ones. Right, we leap forward to the present day now, and it's the top 10 UK Steam games. And at number 10, it's Payday 2, The Goat Simulator Heist, which producer Jimmy has pointed out is tagged as RPG, action, and memes. Now, without looking this up, I'm presuming this is Goat Simulator related DLC for Payday 2, which can only be a good thing. Number 9 is Payday 2 at 75% off. You know, I've still never played Payday 2. I know you won't because it's co-op and you don't like other people. But
no, I don't like other people. I certainly don't like playing with them.
So I'm the only one of us who will ever try this. I'm now really wary of saying that I might try a game because the Twitter police come after me and say, "Have you played this game yet?" So maybe I'll try Payday 2. Number 8 is Fallout 4. Number 7 is Rise of the Tomb Raider Standard Edition. Number 6 is Grand Theft Auto 5. Number 5 is XCOM 2 on pre-order. Things are looking very positive for XCOM 2. A lot of highly positive previews. I think looks like they've learned a lot of lessons from the first one. Better action stuff, I guess.
Yeah, they've gone like even more into the outcomes.
Yep.
I've got these kind of Matrixy style slow down camera. They've got some really kind of silly animations that turn me off personally a little bit. They've gone a bit kind of FMV in some ways, like, and that's cool. That's what people like. It's a little bit too much for me. But I'm sure it's going to be a great game. Number
4 is Homeworld Deserts of Karak on pre-order. Now, on a very quick look, this looks to me like a Homeworld kind of expansion thing that's set on a planet. It looks a bit like Total Annihilation meets Homeworld.
Yeah, this is interesting. This did not have the Homeworld license originally.
Okay, right.
This was given the Homeworld license by, was it Gearbox who bought the Homeworld license? I think it was.
That would make sense.
This was a very promising looking RTS game. And I think it was kickstarted quite possibly, even before it was Homeworld, but I might be completely wrong about that.
Sure.
Anyway, I do not believe it was originally Homeworld license, and now it is. And despite that being a bit of a weird situation, it does actually look like it kind of fits in with the Homeworld thing, so I'm cool with that.
Interesting. Number 3 is Counter-Strike Go. Number 2 is Tom Clancy's The Division on pre-order. I don't really know anything about that. Do you know anything about that?
I know nothing about that.
Number 1 is Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. Dark Arisen. Pre-order.
Offensive subtitle.
And that's the end of that. Right, now it's time to go for your listener questions, because we have quite a lot of those this time. So let's do that first. And our first listener question is from regular listener Ian Hardingham. And he says, what proportion, if any, of their profits should the developers of That Dragon Cancer feel morally obliged to donate to cancer charities? Now, this is following on from the Steam forum controversy around the recently released game, which deals with the diagnosis of cancer of a young child and two parents, how they react to that. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, I better tread carefully. Very emotional area. Obviously, cancer's been in the news a lot this week with the death of David Bowie and Alan Rickman. Having said that, I don't really think that there is any kind of moral necessity to donate money to a cancer charity because you made a game that's about the emotional impact of cancer. I think that they should do. I think like 10% or something like that would be highly appropriate, probably be good PR. I don't necessarily know why you wouldn't do that. But in terms of should you, or you're a bad person, I don't think so. A lot of art that people sell to you is about tragedy and about things like this. And I don't think that you have to look to give a proportion of the money you make from something about that to a charity dealing with that particularly.
So my question here is, this has kind of caught a lot of people off guard. Like, I've seen a lot of people, especially journalists, say, I was not expecting this level of response to this. So there's a kind of spectrum of people who say, this is bad because I saw it on Steam and it reminded me of a bad event in my own life and it shouldn't be on Steam. There are people who said this is fine, but they need to give all the money to cancer charities because they're profiting from cancer. And what I don't understand, I'm trying to be very politic here, what I don't understand is why games keep having this kind of problem. Like, we can move past general surprise that anyone would say those things, and to this point where this seems to... Does this happen with any other medium? Do we just not see it? Because it seems insane to me that, does Solzhenitsyn need to... his estate need to donate all the money from cancer ward to cancer charities? Like, it's mad. Like, why is this being suggested?
Yeah, or not run a TV advert for a movie that heavily prominently features cancer. I think I don't really have anything else to say beyond that. I think that's an excellent point. It's just, why are we still here with this?
Yeah. There must be something unique about games and people's expectations and the audience for games that leads us to have all these... I mean, similar to the beginner's guide thing we had before, where if there's a suggestion of this thing happening narratively that's true, then it has these social consequences. I feel like we seem to have created this hyper-tense social consequence network around everything that happens specifically with games. And it's fine. I mean, the developers have said basically that they're completely fine with all this discussion, and that is like 10 out of 10 developers. That's the right thing to do. Very, very difficult for them to say that as well, because obviously this is a hugely personal thing that they are making a game about. But they've just said basically people can say whatever they want, and that's fine. But it's just why people are saying this that baffles me.
Yeah.
There we go. Sander Van Dragged says, are turn-based games ready for eSports? I feel they have to move away from option selection, as menu choices wouldn't be entertaining enough, although choice commentary on choice strategy makes it extremely suitable for broadcasting. He'd love to hear our thoughts. Now, I have wondered about this a lot. Obviously, Hearthstone is a big-ish eSport. It's sort of a tier 2 eSport, and that's turn-based. I haven't seen any others that are successful as esports, and I really feel like there's a bit of a fundamental problem there.
I don't know. Would you classify snooker as a turn-based game?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, snooker's actually reasonably popular as a spectator sport.
Yeah.
We've talked about late-night poker a lot, although, that's as much about the reality show of the contestants as it is about the sport.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That's true of any sport to a lesser or greater degree. I don't think I believe there's anything really fundamentally wrong with turn-based games. I think that it's generally more entertaining to watch something in real time. Maybe that counts as being a fundamental problem. But I don't think there's anything massively wrong with it. It does seem to I think turn-based games kind of leave on the table a lot of the advantages that esports have over other things. Yeah. And that might be why people are not going to be in a rush to try and really televise something that's not the most exciting computer game. But, you're right, it's about what people play. It's about Hearthstone. So I don't really see any massive problem with it.
I feel that they're at a general disadvantage. Yeah, so I think we kind of agree on this. I think it's if you were trying to make a game that was an esport, which, let's face it, only 2 or 3 companies in the world really viably should do that. But if you were happening to do that, I don't think you'd go for turn-based, just simply because of, as you say, the way it works with broadcast, the way commentary works, the way the kind of ebb and flow of what the audience is doing works. But it is possible. It's not impossible.
There's another problem as well, I think, which is that generally the choices you're making as a player are probably a lot more abstract and complicated with a turn-based game. Yes. Generally, not necessarily. Like, again, snooker works because the choice is completely visible at all times. But in general, if you think about how complicated choosing your Hearthstone card is, it's a lot more complicated than choosing whether to raise, fold, or call in poker.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more complicated, really, than seeing someone choose to kick the ball in a certain direction in a soccer game, even though doing that well is very complicated. So that may be another thing which makes it generally harder to broadcast well.
Yeah, also, you have games where, as you say, the choice is very visible. Something like Street Fighter has the same level of kind of tactical decision-making as a strategy game at that level, but with really good players, because there's almost no barrier between their intention and their actions. You can actually see all the choices happening visually. So that's such a lot for a turn-based game to compete with. Yeah, you're completely right. That hidden process from the audience is very difficult. But, will there be another turn-based esport? Yes. So that will be interesting to see what that is.
I mean, at this point, I'm not even sure what an esport means. I mean, isn't it just a game that has enough players that some of them want to watch it? Like, we've talked a lot about how important it is to get people who don't play a particular game to watch it, and how important that is to its esports status. When we say, will there be an esport like X, what are we saying beyond there will be a very, very, very popular game like X?
I think you are looking for things like regularly highly viewed tournaments. So Rocket League, for example, is an extremely popular game, which is a very low, a low tier, again, esport would be lower tier esport than Hearthstone. So I think you could say Rocket League perhaps is not a completely successful esport as a game. But the problem is that the successful esports, ones that can sustain professional careers, I would say, would be a good category for a real esport. There's so few of those.
Yeah, I wonder, I don't particularly doubt that there's some aspect. I think Rocket League's a good example of something which makes you more likely to watch a game given that you do play it. I don't doubt that mechanism exists. I just kind of wonder what it is.
Yeah. Right. Now we have a sort of 3-tier question from Scipio Acheronus on Twitter. I'm sorry it's taken us such a long time to get to your question. It's a very interesting one. So part 1 is, with lower barriers to entry, will indie devs become more like novelists, innovating on story rather than new tech or mechanics? So I kind of want to go a slightly different route with this and say, do you think that hardcore coding will become less important for game design over time?
Yeah, sure. That was kind of where I was going to go with this as well. Yeah. The only way in which the lower barriers to entry leads to people spending more time on story is because it's going to be more possible for people who care about story and who can't do the coding, as you imply, have the ability to make games. So yes, I think that I don't know whether it'll be with Unity necessarily, or whether it'll be with something more specific, like that in interactive fiction program you use, or
yes.
RPG Maker, something like that. Whatever it is, there'll be an engine which is popular that allows people to work on story as their primary thing. Now, of course, a game, unlike a book, needs more than just a story. So it's got to be based on a genre. If you're not going to do any coding or not going to do very much artwork, then you need to, it's going to be in a fairly narrow genre at that point. So it also will depend, I think, on people being very inspired to make a lot of walking simulators.
Yeah.
But then if you make walking simulators, you have to have art as well. So, interactive fiction is always going to be the only thing that you can do if you're not going to have any of those other skills. But sure, I mean, I think generally lowering barriers to entry will just mean there are more games of all different kinds.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder with art sometimes, and this will probably be sort of in the far future, if so much will be able to be done generatively that you will be able to kind of get around the need for an artist specifically in a lot of instances. I mean, that's probably way too far away to make any sense.
I mean, I would just draw a complete line with how you film a scene in a film. You can go super cheap and go to your local graveyard and record it on a bad video camera with bad stock, or you can pay to go to New York's most famous graveyard and you can have a proper, X, Y, and Z. So I think it'll always be, I don't think it'll be much less, much more accessible than that. You'll be able to buy the cheap world simulator, and people will always be more interested in the stuff that's more premium. Well, not always, but generally there'll always be a quality difference. But yeah, sure, I guess the point at which anyone will be able to make something that has some kind of representational graphics that support their story, that'll happen, yeah.
So parts 2 and 3 of this question, specifically, why don't we see more devs try to essentially mod up to 11 and create a game as good as Thief 2 or Morrowind using the same old tech? A team with great storytelling design skills could do so much with a big scope 2000s era 3D tech game. Now, I think this is probably the issue where people don't necessarily understand that newer engines are a lot easier to use than those engines. I mean, if you look at something like Thief 2 now, you sort of see the textures and stuff and you go, oh, those are really basic textures, like anyone could make those. But assembling that scale of game in that cranky an engine is something that needs huge numbers of people, right?
Yeah, that's true, although I'd probably also say that as big a point is that still required a lot of good art design to make that look okay.
Yes.
I mean, I've always been interested in this idea of taking an older game and focusing only on stuff like the narrative, but then that happens a lot with mods. Like, probably once every 6 months, you get a mod that's high profile enough and big enough to be featured on PCGamer.com or RPS, which is basically doing that for me. So I think it does happen, but I don't think it's very commercial, which may be one of the answers that he's looking for. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's all absolutely true. I feel like that it would be interesting to see an indie Morrowind style thing. Obviously that's ridiculous, and basically whenever anyone tries to do that, they do it really badly. But I'm wondering if there is some combination of things, be it procedural generation or whatever, or actually just getting together a team. Maybe you can make one of those games with like 20 people as opposed to 200 and have it be interesting and have that be commercial and scalable. That's something I still feel is missing a bit from indie games.
Well, again, what he's asking here, and it's actually producer Jimmer has sort of split this up in a kind of confusing way, is... Yeah, sorry. It feels very much to me like we're still talking about the kind of thing that modders do. So do I think that a team of 20 people should make a commercial mod of something, I don't know, like Half-Life 1 or Deus Ex or indeed Morrowind or something, and focus, entirely on the storytelling? I think that would be pretty interesting. Again, I feel like people are doing those as mods.
Yeah.
And, anyone who is going to give years of their life and a lot of money to making a game like this is almost always going to have enough ego and belief in the product to not want everything about it to look like Game X from back then. So they're still going to want it sort of, in order to be able to put so much of themselves into something, they're generally going to want to have sort of bespoke graphics, I would say.
Sure. Right. We have a question from Tashrike, but it's a bit too in-depth for our abilities today. So what I shall do is I shall put that in next week. So sorry, Tashrike, can't cover that now. Question from Blubbershark. Was programming the back-end server for Synapse/Cortex boring or a nice change?
It was exciting. So the vast majority of the code was done for Synapse. I didn't have to do very much new for Cortex at all. I really spent very little time on new server features for Cortex. A couple of contract programmers did the new stuff for that. It was really cool because actually the back-end server stuff for FS was really important. It's kind of easy to forget, young man, that FS did a load of things for the first time with its multiplayer for a turn-based game, and I think it was still a really big part of its success. And being involved in making something like that was really fun, and I did it all on my own, which meant that I had full control over what I was doing. So even though it took a long time, it was really good, and yeah, it was a nice change.
Awesome. Is it possible to make a story-based play-by-mail MMO in the style of Frozen Cortex? I guess so. I'm not really sure what that would be like. Are there any story-based play-by-mail MMOs?
You tell me, Blubber Shark.
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine a story-based play-by-mail MMO. I guess it'd be a bit like Fallen London. That's the only thing that's a bit like that I can think of. How many multiplayer game modes is too many?
That's the wrong question. A game breaks when you have modes that are sort of different in the wrong way, so that people only want to play one of them or a subset of them. I think if you can have 20 multiplayer game modes if you want. If people are happy to play all of them and don't really mind, then that's not a problem. But if you have 2 game modes and everyone will only play one or the other, then you've got a problem. So that's the case there.
Sure. I think that's fine. Andrew John Smith asks, favourite Bowie song, favourite Bowie moment, and fave Bowie persona. So I'm going to go with Under Pressure, which is not a popular song for Bowie fans, and there'll be a theme here. But I really like that song. It's quite funny. The video is amazing. Favourite Bowie moment? I think possibly either his appearance in Omnicron, the Nomad Soul, or when he predicted the impact of the internet. Or fave Bowie persona. I don't really like any of his personas. I like him. I think he's good. I like the interviews where he's not pretending to be an alien or some kind of magical special being. I think he's an interesting person. And honestly, I found all the dressing up and stuff a bit annoying. Just being honest. There you go.
I'm very seldom subjected to anything in this kind of region of culture. So I had no idea he did Under Pressure, for instance. I couldn't name another one of his songs, but he was in my favourite film of all time, The Prestige.
Yes.
As in a truly brilliant part, playing Tesla, and he was great in it. So that's great. And of course, you've got to mention the Nomad Soul. That's a big video game moment.
There we go. Binster asks, do you think Stephen Avery did it? I mean, that now... This is clearly a troll question, but we're going to answer it anyway. So, yes, if you haven't watched Making a Murderer on Netflix, then do that and don't listen to this. If you have and you've finished it, then we might talk about this a bit, although perhaps we've done to death now. Do we think Stephen Avery did it? I mean, I don't know if that's like a completely appropriate question for us to be conjecturing about on this. I feel like... I definitely think Stephen Avery needs a new trial. That's what I think. That's my answer.
I'm happy to talk about this. I think it's okay to conjecture, because he's been found guilty, so we're kind of allowed to... Like, if he'd been found innocent and we conjectured he was guilty, that would be much, much worse.
That's true.
Than him being found guilty and us conjecturing that he's guilty. I have to say, I think I feel very slightly differently to you about this. I do think on balance that he did it. And I do not feel that his trial was so egregious that I necessarily think he needs another trial. It takes such a huge amount of effort to get the trial right. And I kind of look at the things that happened in that trial, and I'm not really sure. The thing that I thought was most egregious was this thing about the bones in the other location, and now I'm reading that they weren't even identified as hers. And so that's my position on that. I think that the kid definitely needs a new trial.
I mean, I just don't see how anyone can really look at that trial and say that it was legitimate to the extent of the fact that stuff was admitted and other stuff was not admitted, which seemed to be kind of inherently contradictory for one thing. The fact that there were not ridiculous allegations about what happened during deliberation. I know that there's this huge disconnect between what the state is allowed to do with deliberation and what they're not, but given everything else about the case, that seems like it would be a good thing to do. Quite why they couldn't have a different venue for it other than creating one which had a jury of people who all knew him. I have no idea. So I felt that a lot of things about it were very compromised. I feel like in a situation where there is an enormous amount of controversy about a judicial process, you should at least get an appeal. Maybe not a complete retrial. I don't think that anyone has a good balance of things to look at to decide whether he did it or not based on that documentary and the subsequent stuff. Because obviously the only thing you can really go on is what you see of the trial there. If someone's got the whole transcript, then maybe they can make a better decision about what they do as a juror or about what they think. I feel like the whole thing is compromised. And again, my only conclusion really is that I don't feel like the trial was particularly effective.
I mean, for me, it's kind of like, if you think something weird happened during deliberations, then he needs a new trial. But if you don't, then, then obviously for that reason that you don't. And I don't know if I think there's enough specific smoke there. I just generally thought that the state didn't make an amazing case. I thought they made an alright case. And I was compelled by the idea that when the jurors initially polled each other to find out how people were thinking, most of them were leaning towards not guilty. So that kind of makes me feel like there was less of a problem of the people of the jury pool being sort of having a problem with that. I'm kind of alright with it having to be in the county. I think that the stuff that came out before his trial, the crazy stories about what he was supposed to have done with his nephew, probably hurt the prosecution more than it helped it, because they weren't able to. They decided not to talk about it, and the defense did this really interesting sort of passive defense where they basically, without ever mentioning anything about those allegations, they kind of tried to disprove them, which I thought was quite effective. In order to get one of the few things I understand reasonably well about the US court system is that in order to get an appeal, you have to either show that there is new evidence or that there was something like specifically wrong with your trial.
That's to get a retrial.
Get a retrial, right. That's what you're appealing on the basis of, right?
Well, I also think he should have had an appeal, at least.
So what does the appeal do?
So the appeal challenges the verdict of the original trial, and a retrial is a complete retrial based on, as you say, some procedural issue with the trial.
Right. Again, I think the appeal is the same, though. It requires a change, as in either a new piece of information or a specifically a thing that was wrong with the case. I
am not sure that's correct, actually.
That's my opinion of it, anyway. I think I view the case itself, from what I saw of it, a little less egregiously than you do. I think there's a lot of weird stuff going on. It's a pity that we don't know for sure. That's the main thing.
One of the things I don't understand is, why is evidence admissible from an entire police force who was expressly told not to be involved with the investigation? I feel like there should be a cutoff if that happens. Because he was suing them at the time, I feel like that's an innate conflict of interest. And I am surprised that you can't just say he was suing them, therefore they were instructed not to be there, therefore any evidence that they produce is not valid. That would seem to make sense to me, but that's not part of the legal process.
Yeah, I mean, they had to make a call on that, because the problem is that, and this is the thing that sort of most got to me about this entire thing, the police believe he's guilty.
Yeah.
And it's not just about this case. A lot of the time, the police just believe the person they've got is guilty. They believe it very strongly. Yeah. And they are not interested in whether their case is good enough. That's not the thing they're focusing on. They're focused on the fact that they believe you're guilty and they want to get you convicted. Yeah. So, the people who kind of were behind the decision-making process for that, the judge has got to weigh up the fact that if he throws all that out, because what's happened has happened. They can't change that these guys were involved in the investigation. He probably knows that if he throws out everything to do with that, then the guy's going to walk free. So he has to make this choice about whether he thinks that they planted evidence. That's what he's got to make the choice on. Like, he can't. I don't think it's enough to just say, well, there's impropriety here because the guy was suing this police force and they got involved anyway. I don't think that's enough to just say, okay, well, I'm definitely going to let this. Basically, I'm going to make the decision that will definitely let this murderer walk free.
Well, that shouldn't be part of the equation. Either it's procedural or not. You can't take into account consequences like that. That would make a load of presumptions about the trial, and that's not the way a judge should approach a decision.
I do agree with that. So you're saying that you just think it should be...
If it were possible,
it should be straightforward, that any police force that is being sued by someone...
No. In the case where they've been specifically instructed by the DA or whoever not to be involved...
Right.
Then they shouldn't be involved, for one thing. And if they are, it should compromise the investigation. There should be a disincentive legally for them being involved. And that would just make sense to me. And that wasn't addressed, and I don't know why that's the case. That's my main problem with the trial, is just simply that. That everything that stems from that is then questionable, especially given that their behaviour when they were involved was significantly odd. I think that's demonstrable. So that's why I feel it's kind of an entirely compromised thing, and it's very difficult to establish whether you actually believe his guilt or not, independent of the program or whatever. It's very difficult to establish that just because it's so innately compromised.
Yeah, I do agree with that, although you've still then got to make the decision about whether they actually planted stuff or not. And it feels to me that a trial is going to be better placed to work that out than no trial. Like, it's only a problem if they were involved if they actually exercised impropriety.
Right, yeah, I'm saying that, that's true, but I'm saying that by the time you've got there, then that just becomes a huge clusterfuck, as you can see from what happened.
Yeah, and I completely agree, but but given that that's the situation you're in, your two choices are, like you say, completely throw out any evidence from that, and I think meaningfully hurt the case to the extent it may not be triable, or to try and sort of thrash that out in court. I agree that it would be good to find a rule, because the judge shouldn't be making it on all of those larger things. I don't know about...
Maybe there's some place for a pre-trial hearing in which you establish that, and then the defence can't argue on that basis, or they can, whether it was planted or not. I feel like that complicates the idea of trying to establish someone's guilt so much that it's almost too much for a jury to try and think about that and think about reasonable doubt.
Yeah, it's so complicated. You're accusing... The things that have to be true for the defence to be accurate are that an unknown third party had to kill the victim and frame Stephen Avery, and then the police department had to plant evidence. Both of those things have to be true for you to buy into the defence, and that always seemed like the biggest problem to me, is that sort of either of those things seems quite unlikely. I mean, I know that the way they acted means that them planting evidence doesn't seem that unlikely, but either of those things is a pretty tall ask.
I feel like...
But both of them together...
When you talk about this, sometimes you're saying that you had to believe that somebody else killed her in order to return not guilty. Is that...
No, I know that that's not... Well, no, right, and I did say to believe the defence. Of course, if there's reasonable doubt raised, then that's where you return non-guilty. So I do understand that.
Right.
But it for me, it's still very sort of clearly like the vast majority of the reasonable doubt they were creating was reasonable doubt created through the idea that those two things might be true, right? Like,
I feel like that. Yes, to the planting of evidence. Like, I mean, you would have to believe that evidence was planted to explain the blood. Surely, like, there's no other explanation for that. Unless you could show that he was in the car and he had this cut on his hand or something. And I don't know if they did, because you didn't see much discussion of that. So that could be another way that you could argue for reasonable doubt there, if you knew that he'd been in her car for some sensible reason. But that's very implausible. So yes, I think you do have to believe that there is a good chance of that evidence being planted. But in terms of what else happened, I don't think you need to believe anything else there.
Well, because it's like it's possible that the evidence was planted and he's still guilty.
Yes.
And I think that you still return guilty if you believe that to be true. So in order to return not guilty, you both have to, like the police could make an amazing case that shows 100% that he did it, and also be shown to have like planted evidence in some separate way, like, and in that you would still return guilty, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's quite a fine point. I think it would have to be very overwhelming, because as soon as you find out that one of the key pieces of evidence has been planted, you can't realistically trust evidence with which the same people were associated.
Yeah, so, and I'm just trying to say that, for me, I still have to believe... surely that the situation still has to be that both they planted evidence and someone else killed her.
Well, you don't have to know that, or have any confidence in it, really.
But if I'm returning not guilty, I have to believe that someone else killed her.
No, you just have to believe that it's not been sufficiently proven that he did, even if you do believe that he did.
Yes, that is true.
And I feel
it's about making the case.
That's why I'm so strong on this, and a lot of people are like, but there's a good chance that he did. It doesn't matter like what the chance of him doing it is, based on the doubt you have about a specific part of how that's proven. It's such a difficult concept. Like people struggle with it constantly.
Yeah, I think it's like, my view of the case was that they cast reasonable doubt that he was innocent, but like, and that was kind of what was that was the overwhelming evidence to me, that the case made me doubt he was innocent reasonably. It did not make me completely compelled that he was guilty, sure. Which shouldn't be, as you say, shouldn't be enough.
Yeah. No, I think that's fine, and that's a fair way of putting it. It's just, it's so frustrating. I mean, the other point I'll make in terms of if you personally think that he actually did it or not, irrespective of legal process, is the point I made to you earlier, which is that he spent pretty much all of his time, according to the documentary makers, trying to find points of law which would enable him to get another trial. And by this point, with all you've been through, you think you would probably at least give up, if not confess.
So I think you could go both ways on that. So I don't think that's a bad point. But I could also construct a narrative where, as far as he's concerned, this is exactly the same as when he was sent to jail for something he didn't do, except that he did do it. So it's like he went through a process before with a thing which was very similar in his mind, and he went through these things and he ended up getting out. So it's like, in some ways, it's kind of, because it's similar, he might just do that again.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, the extent to which a person would do that, I think it's possible for someone to do that. I don't know if they'd be able to do it to the same extent without the same level of certainty. But you'd need to know a lot about that person to make a call on either side of that, really, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, he did stay in jail much longer than he needed to, because he refused to pretend to be guilty, which, as again we talked about earlier, kind of it in itself could mean one of two different things. But it's a fascinating TV show. Loved it.
There we go. We did our customary podcast exegesis on that. Yeah, it is good. I think it's definitely opened the door for longer form, more thoughtful, reality-based, slow-paced things, and that's good for me because I like that kind of thing. Right, Philip Back asks, for our craft's future, should programmers become storytellers or writers learn how to program? I feel, what is this thing? This is like the topic du jour. I think we've kind of covered this. Now, I guess I can say, should writers learn how to program? I think writers should know how to do some scripting, and I think writers should understand a bit of what programming is like and talk to programmers. But I don't think writers should learn how to program. There's a huge drive at the moment of getting everyone to learn how to program. And I feel like it's a good thing to have a reasonable understanding of, but I don't feel like everyone should need to know how to do it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've been vaguely aware of that process as well. I don't think we're heading to a future where everyone has to be able to program, like everyone has to be able to read and write. No. I mean, in a lot of ways, where we see the future going would involve less people programming, not more.
Yeah.
It reminds me a bit of Cars, where if you were sort of passably okay with being with the inside of a car 20 years ago, you could perform an awful lot of maintenance on a car, and now the same level is going to get you absolutely nowhere because cars are so advanced and have so many black boxes inside them, and that's kind of where we would probably be going. Beyond something different happening, to the extent to which the automation and pre-existing libraries are too impenetrable. It's a story I've brought up before, but apparently it takes 5 separate people at Intel combined to be able to explain everything that's going on in an Intel chip. Like, these things are incredibly complicated now. I don't know. I think that as a game designer and programmer myself, I think people romanticize the idea of these amazing narrative experiences in games in a way that I think sometimes doesn't fit the medium properly. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the one thing that I'd say for that, should programmers become storytellers, I feel like actually what both groups should do is listen more intelligently to the other group, because there's such an enormous tendency for people to frame things so much around their own basis for everything. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of that hugely, and I think it improves you so much if you really try and empathize with another person's point of view. Like, maybe the reason someone from a different discipline thinks your process is silly is because there are elements of it which are silly or don't take into account things. And I also think there's a lot of disdain around art stuff from people who are highly rational and highly technical, and I think that really needs to stop. Like, I don't think now you have the same disdain for technical things from creative people, but there's still a lot of animosity towards, I guess, a literature or art-centric approach to something that is unhelpful. Sure. Sounds good. Right, and finally, Mia Dragovicevic says, which Let's Players do you recommend game developers check out? I really like Northern Lion a lot. He's the Let's Player or YouTuber that I watch most. I like Mathis Games and Gaming FTL. They're good. I think basically every Let's Player is someone that a game developer should check out. I mean, Retsupre are my favourite comedic Let's Players, but I can't say you'd learn much about game development from watching them. Just watch different ones, I think. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I'm not a big Let's Player watcher. Right, that's the end of that. It's been quite a long one this time, but a good one, I think. Thank you once again for your support. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Mode7Games. He's Ian Hardingham. Do tell other people to listen to the show so that we grow our base of adoring fans. Thank you very much. Thank you and goodbye.
That's it, children. Time for bed. Don't forget to pay us a visit at www.visitingthevillage.com.